I want to bring in now MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode. Also with us, retired U.S. Navy Vice Admiral Robert Hayward, and he's a senior advisor at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America and former Deputy Chief of Staff at the Defense Department under Secretary Chuck Hagel. Wendy Anderson. David, starting with you, just diagnose for us what you heard from that conversation between Steph Ruhle and the president.
So I listened to the entire interview, and the president, what you just highlighted, which is he wants to prevent Iran from rebuilding for 10 years, and he wants to prevent Iran from ever having a nuclear weapon. All of that requires changing the regime in Tehran or American ground troops. And so in his tone of voice, he did not seem to be humbled by what is happening. And he rarely mentioned the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. That's the key thing here that has driven up global oil prices so much. So the president is charging ahead based on what I heard. And the president has said he's not ruling out boots on the ground, but that he's not going to put boots on the ground, and that if he was going to do that, he's not going to tell us about it. Admiral, I should say, in this MS Now interview with Trump, he is effectively acknowledging that the U.S. will be in this war with Iran for an extended period. That's consistent with what we've been hearing from intel sources as well. How long could it be?
Well, one thing's for sure, the president and his team has really been using deceptions and keeping their options open every step of the way. So again, I don't think time is the real determinant here. I think results are, and he made that very clear today. He's committed to see this thing through, and he knows what a long-term threat is that this is. If the regime stays in power, they will reconstitute. It doesn't matter if it's a decade from now, 2 decades ago. So the center of gravity remains the regime.
Wendy, the president saying now that the major standpoint, the sticking point here is making sure that Iran does not have access or develop a nuclear weapon in that new interview with MS Now that we just heard from Steph Ruhle. But Iran still has roughly 1,000 pounds, 60% enriched uranium. What could or should be done to try to secure that?
Well, I think that has to be one of the top priorities. And Ariel, I might just say, what President Trump said this morning, obviously we need to pay attention to it. It's very interesting, as the Admiral just said. He wants to seem to deliver on results. But the question I have is, will the real objective please stand up and put its hand in the air so we can know what it is? I really wanted to hear from the president. I think many Americans want to hear from the president. I think people from both parties would like to hear from the president. Hey, what are the objectives? It's okay to have more than one. We know that. This is a very complicated part of the world, and it's a complicated set of relationships that involve, global trade, that involve the global energy supply and infrastructure. We'd like to hear objectives described in plain form. If the goal is deterrence, let's say it. If it's containment, let's say it. If it's, disallowing for any additional nuclear material to be developed, let's say it. There's no clear end state here. And I think the further we go and advance into this situation, the U.S. risks being pulled deeper into a conflict where economic costs continue to rise, while our purpose, whatever it is, gets harder to explain.
And speaking of those objectives, whether it's said or unsaid, clearly the biggest objective here is opening the Strait of Hormuz, David. Is a move to occupy, to block Karg Island part of the calculus in trying to reopen the strait? How does that factor in? Yeah, they're both. So Karg is really a pressure point. That's where 90% of Iran's oil goes through that one island. It's about 20 miles off the coast of Iran. There's 2,200 Marines headed towards Iran right now. They could seize Karg. I've had experts say to me that would clearly cause them a problem in terms of revenue, but Iran has been under sanctions for years. They've been storing food. There's actually rationing has already started in Iran. So it's not clear that they would unconditionally surrender if Karg went. The bigger, important thing for the president would be getting tankers moving through the Strait of Hormuz. I spoke to maritime experts and former military officials. Some of them say you would have to have American boots on the ground inside on the coast of Iran to prevent Iranians from firing. There's mountains and other elevated areas where they could fire on these ships. Others say the U.S. could just do that with some destroyers and some drones patrolling overhead. Ship owners aren't going to send their ships through that strait until they feel it's definitely secure. It could cost a lot of money. And then as long as this regime exists in Tehran, you could have, one person told me, American destroyers escorting tankers for years. And clearly this is a survivalist regime. And if they're backed into a corner, Haag no longer exists for them. Who knows what the incentive is to stop this anytime soon. Admiral, to David's point, what would an actual ground operation, what would boots on the ground in Haag look like?
Well, that's what the Marines do. They're built to that. They've done that throughout their history. It's a amphibious landing seas in the ground, and that's doable. But don't forget, there's a whole other range of options. There are MEO operations, maritime interception operations, going and boarding every ship, blockading Iranian ships, not letting their ghost fleet sail. There's also Bandar Abbas. So the president and the national security team has a full range of options. I would also like to note today, because we've just kicked off Nowruz, it's Iranian New Year's. This is one of those most significant days on the Iranian calendar where the people always celebrate. They stop everything. That is not happening. But that presents another challenge for the regime. The people are thinking that. They're being oppressed. They're being put down. They can't come out of their homes because they're going to be shot. So pressure continues to build. And I'm sure this administration will leverage all of those options to enhance that pressure on the regime.
The question is whether that pressure will actually last or end up in any kind of substantial change in the regime. David, Iran launched strikes against Kuwait. Oil facilities, energy facilities are under attack right now. What are the implications there? How bad has the damage been?
It's driving up oil prices right now, but it's sort of slowing natural gas production and oil drilling for, it could be weeks or months. There's now no place for Saudi Arabia to put its oil. The tankers that are all full of oil and they can't get through the strait, so they're slowing down the amount of oil they're pumping. And then what was hit yesterday was the largest natural gas processing center in the Middle East in Qatar. And so, again, that backs up natural gas. Natural gas prices in Europe went up by 30% yesterday. So it's, again, a test of wills. Maybe the Iranians will give up. Maybe the Iranian peoples will rise up. They're betting that, Trump will blink before they do. So,
Wendy, as you see the continued targeting of these energy sites, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, what's the long-term impact on the global economy? How do we recover from this even after the acute fighting stops?
The long-term impact, if things continue to escalate as it is now, is extremely intense and dangerous. This is no longer about a single, isolated disruption. When attacks continue to hit production and refining and export capacity across the Gulf, as we've specifically seen, Iran has hit four of its neighbors in the region just in the last 36 hours. The issue becomes the resilience of the regional energy system itself. So energy markets don't wait, for diplomats or administrations to catch up. Even before there's a sustained supply loss, the fear of those repeat attacks itself can drive prices and disrupt planning and create pressure on governments that, are far from the battlefield. I think there really should be, hopefully from our government and also other partners that we are asking the administration to come on board and help us and support this war in some way. There's got to be some imposition of strategic discipline on this crisis. And I think that makes clear to allies and to adversaries alike, that attacks on the energy infrastructure that have global implications are not just another tactical move. They're a threshold issue that clearly are widening the war, destabilizing power states, and right now triggering economic consequences that don't seem to have a real end in sight. So it's certainly worth watching very closely.
And speaking of global implications, Admiral, I'd love to know your thoughts on the global threat environment that we see ourselves in. Iran state media is now reporting a statement put out by the country's armed forces that's warning against tourist attractions, resorts, and entertainment centers around the world, that they will not be safe now. Give us a sense for Iran's capacity to inflict terror on countries across the world. How serious is this threat?
The threat's real. But more importantly, the fact that we've let it exist and build over decades is part of the problem and indicative of why we need to stay the course. if we don't deal with this now, this problem's only going to grow. It's going to be a cancer that continues to metastasize and be empowered by their success in this campaign. So not just, and again, that's a threat, but bigger concern is the missiles. As we said for the last 2 or 3 weeks, the ability to shut down their missiles and allow the flow of oil through the straits is first and foremost. You do that, then we can deal with these networks. We can deal with the regimes. So again, the fact that this has been going on and has been a threat for decades now illustrates why we have to solve this problem now. If we don't, it's only going to get worse.